Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming out in this weather. And I am actually not a professional bagpipe player. That implies a certain level of skill. I enjoy playing, but thank you, Antonio. Anyway, I want to give a shout out to my daughter, Julia, who is an occupational therapist with Sutter in San Francisco. She's watching tonight. Okay. This is a picture of me like about 10 years ago, so I've changed a little. Yeah. Okay, so Chris is going to talk about why genes aren't our destiny, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how being in sync with some of our genes actually really helps to promote health. So at the end of this talk, I'm hoping that you'll have a basic understanding of circadian rhythm and what we call clock genes, and how when we work with our clock genes and our inherent biological rhythms, we can do a lot to optimize our health and well-being. This includes looking at the impact of our meal timing and time-restricted eating on metabolism and illness, and also the impact of sleep and optimal light on our health. This is a quote from Dr. Sachin Panda. He's one of the leading researchers in circadian rhythm down at the Salk Institute in San Diego. And he says, our modern lifestyle is disrupting a deeply ingrained, primordial, and universal code to being healthy. I feel like the more we learn about the root causes of illness and where we've gotten out of balance, the more we're starting to see that our modern lifestyle, really probably starting with the Industrial Revolution, but especially after World War II, has really had an impact on our health. So what is circadian rhythm? Circadian rhythm refers to a roughly 24-hour internal clock that regulates the genes of our cells and organs and tells them when to turn on and to turn off. And this influences our sleep, our biology, wakefulness, digestion. We're starting to see that this actually has an impact, a vast impact on our health and well-being. The term circadian was coined in 1959 by Dr. Franz Hallberg at the University of Minnesota, and it comes from the Latin circa, meaning about, and day, and dies or day. And Hallberg is considered the father of American chronobiology, or biological rhythms. So what are clock genes? Clock genes are the genetic material found in every single organ that provide a set of instructions for making proteins that help to tell the organ when to operate most efficiently. The master clock is in the brain, in the part of the brain called the hypothalamus, but in fact, every organ in the body has its own clock genes. Almost every aspect of our life and optimal body function is guided by these clocks. And we see this widely in nature. In every plant, animal, bacteria, microorganisms, we see these same clocks. It was first noted in the 1700s when a plant biologist noted that certain plants opened their leaves at certain times of the day and closed at certain times of the day, and this was rhythmic, again, according to that 24-hour clock. So when we disrupt that rhythm, we actually are impacting the well-being of our organs and cells, and this is now being linked to many of the chronic illnesses that we deal with. In 2017, the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine was awarded to 3 scientists for the work that they have done on circadian rhythm. And Dr. Sachin Panda, his quote was at the beginning, is also doing a lot of this work in San Diego. We have come to see that we may be able to influence our health and well-being simply by adjusting our schedules so that they fall naturally into the circadian rhythm that nature intended for us. Let's just say medical training is not very conducive to following in these natural rhythms. So this is a diagram from a study that was published last year. You can see at the top here, there are many things that influence our rhythms and our biological clocks. Heredity plays a role in some of these clocks, and our lifestyle certainly does as well. When we have disrupted sleep, uneven sleep patterns, shift work, poor food habits, etc., it leads to this disharmony in these clocks, and now we're starting to see that this, in fact, may be really affecting a lot of the chronic illnesses that we are dealing with now. So I'm going to focus on the middle there from Dr. Panda to leverage our daily rhythms and really make them work with us, for us. We have to do just a few things. Sleep at the right time and on a regular basis, eat at the right time, and get a little bit of bright light during the daytime. Many of us now have what we call nature deficit disorder. We are not outside in the bright light. And that's really the foundation. For example, growth hormone, which is secreted in the brain at night and is important for our growth and for our muscle development, rises in the middle of the night, especially if we don't have food in our stomach in the middle of the night. And when the growth hormone goes up, it helps to start repair, especially of the gut. And the gut can't do that if there's still food in your stomach and the hormone signals in the brain are mixed up. In ancient medical systems like Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine, optimal health was felt to be determined by how much we were in sync with these natural rhythms. Our ancient systems of medicine really were some of the original circadian medicine. So these patterns are important for sleeping, eating, for movement, and for optimal health of our brain, our gut, our cardiovascular system, immune system, and metabolism. So this is just an image from Wikipedia looking at where our organs are most likely to function optimally during the day. So you here see at 6 a.m. in the morning, later after that, we see the sharpest rise in blood pressure. So heart attacks and strokes are often most likely to occur in the morning, again with this rise in blood pressure. And then, especially as we get outside into the morning light, our melatonin secretion stops. The brain knows that it's time to wake up, and the melatonin secretion drops. Bowel movement is more likely in the morning if we're following this rhythm. So again, as you can see, there's all of these things are programmed genetically in our organs to operate most efficiently at certain times of the day. So when we disrupt these circadian rhythms over time, short-term disruption, 1 to 7 days, can lead to insomnia, fatigue, indigestion, constipation, pain, migraines, mood changes, blood sugar elevation. That's when I knew my rhythm was out, was when my blood sugar became elevated. And chronic disruption, weeks, months, and years, like a medical career, right, can lead to metabolic diseases, inflammation, oxidative stress, GI diseases, autoimmune, neurodegenerative diseases, cognitive issues, mood issues, depression, ADHD, cancer, reproductive diseases. And that may sound like bad news, but nurturing our circadian rhythm can help to prevent and even reverse some of these challenges. So what are some of the disruptors that we see? Shift work is one. If we work for more than 3 hours between the hours of 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. more than 50 days a year, that's considered a significant circadian disruptor. And about 20 to 25% of non-military Americans now fall into this category. If we have an irregular sleep schedule, if our sleep is disrupted or we're sleep deprived, if we are subjected to light pollution in the evening, natural light exposure deficiency during the day, irregular meal times, etc., all of these are circadian disruptors. So I'm going to focus on 2 specific areas, nutrition and digestion, and sleep and light exposure. So I find this really fascinating. In 1977, most Americans ate 3 meals a day. For those of you who grew up in the 40s, 50s, 60s, or whatever, you had 2 or 3 meals a day and the kitchen was closed after meals, right? This is from the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. By 2004, we were eating 6 times a day. Now we have access to food 24 hours a day. When I was a kid growing up in the 50s and 60s, you did not see people walking around carrying Starbucks and, eating cookies while they were shopping. So how much are we eating now? Dr. Panda and his team developed something called My Circadian Clock, where people sign up and they log in when they're eating. And this now is being used by multiple research groups looking at patterns of eating and how they're affecting our health. So he affectionately calls this the feedogram. I'll show you a picture in a minute. And what they have found from their data is that 10% of people who were part of this study were eating 10 times a day. 10% of people ate 3.3 times a day, so still a little bit more than what we did in the 1970s, and the remaining 80% were eating between 3.3 and 10 times a day. Most subjects ate frequently throughout their wakeful hours, and there was a bias towards eating late, with an estimated less than 25% of calories consumed early in the day, and more than 35% of our calories eaten after 6 p.m. This is when our digestive clocks, like in our gut and pancreas, have turned off the digestive fire, as we call it Agni in Ayurvedic medicine. Digestive fires are turned off by that time of day. So bottom line, some of us start eating as soon as we get up and keep eating until we go to bed at night. Metabolic or social jet lag was also common, and this occurs when we change our patterns over the weekend. If we sleep in late, we're eating later, it's like a form of jet lag because we're still changing our patterns and our hours. So this is Dr. Panda's feedogram. Every dot here is a time when people are eating. Our ancestors tended to eat between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. if we were lucky, if we had food. And now you can see we're mostly eating, some of us close to 18, 20 hours a day. So given this information, Dr. Panda did this study, and he took a group of mice, and he had one of them 24 access to high sugar, high fat foods. And the other group of mice ate the same foods, but they ate them in an 8-hour window. And what he found was that the mice who ate around the clock became obese and sick, while the mice on the time-restricted diet did not. Even though they were eating the same crappy diet, they were protected from diabetes, obesity, and fatty liver. Why is this? He postulated that the smaller eating window provided the gut the time it needed to clean things up and rejuvenate and support the microbiome and the metabolism. Evidence in humans suggests that consuming most of our food early in the day helps to ensure optimal digestion and metabolism. The circadian clock genes in our pancreas, our gut, liver, maximize their production of insulin and their digestive enzymes and juices early in the day. It really peaks by late morning, perhaps early afternoon, and it drops off in the evening. We're not really equipped to continue trying to digest and metabolize food later in the day. And these genes turn off and on regularly according to their genetic timing. Multiple studies now show that blood sugar control is best in the morning, and it's worse in the evening when we're eating. And remember that slide, 35% of us now are eating, a good majority of us are eating 35% of our calories after dinner. If we eat late in the evening, we're sending conflicting signals to the rest of the body. It tells the body, oh, it's daytime, right? The brain is trying to make melatonin, trying to turn down for the night, trying to relax, and this creates what we call clock confusion. So Dr. Courtney Peterson at University of Alabama says if you're constantly eating at a time of day when you're not getting bright light exposure, the different clock systems are out of sync. It's like one clock is in the time zone of Japan and another in the United States. Conflicting signals. So Dr. Peterson was part of a small study that was done looking at pre-diabetic men who were overweight. And in the first part of the study, she had the men consume all of their food within a 12-hour window, which is an improvement over what most of us do now, right? But a 12-hour window. And then she had them eat all of their food in a 6-hour window. And she ensured that they were eating in a way that they did not change their weight, because she didn't want change in weight to be affecting the results of what she was looking for. So when we eat in a smaller window and we eat early in the day, we call this early time-restricted eating. So eating your food in a 6 or 8 hour window is time-restricted eating, and when we eat early in the day, we call that early time-restricted eating. So what she found was that the men who ate early in the day, again, same amount of calories, same weight, they had lower insulin level, they had less inflammation, less oxidative stress, and their nighttime hunger dropped off. They also had a 10 to 11 point drop in their blood pressure. She called the results shocking, stunning. A 10-point drop in your blood pressure is better than some of the blood pressure medications that we use. So this is a picture of what she was doing. So initially the men were eating in this 12-hour window, right between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m., and then she had them eat here in this early period, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. And again, all of these changes were noted. Drop in blood pressure, oxidative stress, insulin sensitivity went up, beta cell function, that's our pancreatic function, that improved, diabetes improved. But isn't this really hard to do? What was really interesting was that on average it took people about 12 days to adjust to this, but once they got used to it, hunger and the capacity to eat actually diminished in the evening. People stopped feeling hungry in the evening. So why is this so important? This timing of eating is like an external cue that tells the internal clock to maintain a balance between nourishment and repair. We need both. When we eat, our metabolism is focused on nourishment, digestion of food, absorption of nutrients, and when we are not eating, when we're fasting, we switch to repair and rejuvenation. Our internal resilience is strengthened. Within 2 to 3 weeks of doing this, many people notice improvements in their sleep. Symptoms of heartburn usually begin to resolve. How many people are taking stomach acid medications for years, and what we're finding now is that it has a negative impact on your kidneys, on your gut, it may increase your risk of infections. These drugs are not benign drugs. When we start eating in this way, many of these symptoms disappear. By 4 to 6 weeks, people notice an increase in energy during the day. Even my 28-year-old son, he actually listened to me and he started doing this. He was like, "Mom, I can't believe it. My energy is so much better during the day." And then by 6 to 12 weeks, we'll begin to see improvements in blood glucose, blood pressure, irritable bowel syndrome, other gut issues. So if weight loss is a goal, try to eat within a smaller window. And if you want to have an even greater impact, make that window early in the day. If it feels too difficult, just start where you are and start to move your timing up so that maybe if you stop eating at 8 o'clock now, maybe you move it to 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock, okay? Researchers find that kind of like what Adele Davis, anybody remember Adele Davis? Right, one of the original America's nutritionists. She used to say, eat breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, and dinner like a pauper. And if we look at that, if we eat that big breakfast, we tend to have a lean gut. And if we're eating a small breakfast and we're getting most of our food in later in the day, we're going to be more at risk for becoming obese and insulin resistant. Jason Fung is a kidney specialist who is very well known. He's an expert in fasting. And I thought this was a great quote. The bottom line is this: we focus nearly obsessively on the question of what to eat. How many of you are weary of hearing what the diet of the week or the month is, right? People say all the time, well, what's the best diet for me? We really don't know, but we hear it all the time. Should I be a vegan or a vegetarian or a pescatarian or a paleo or a keto? Or we don't know the answer to that. But the answer changes every few weeks or few years depending on who you ask. And maybe the question that we have forgotten to ask is, what effect does meal timing and circadian rhythm have on our wellness? And maybe we should be focusing on that instead. One of the things, this is another quote from Dr. Panda: every single day the sun rises and at night it falls. We are designed to have 24-hour rhythms in our physiology and metabolism. These rhythms exist because just like our brains need to go to sleep each night to repair, reset, and rejuvenate, every organ needs to have downtime to repair and reset as well. So how about sleep? In 2002, it was discovered that there is a protein in the back of the eye called melanopsin. And melanopsin turns out to be a key player in the sleep, light, wake cycle. So it is sensitive to blue light. Blue light is the light that we are exposed to when we are outside during the day, especially in the morning, to bright light. And so when we are exposed to that light, it hits the back of the eyes, it hits that protein, and it tells the brain to turn off melatonin. It tells the brain it's daytime, it's time to wake up. At night, when sunlight goes down, then the pineal gland in the brain is secreting melatonin and telling the brain and the body that it's time to close down for the night. This was in the Sacramento Bee just 11 days ago. And this was some information about Robert Soler. He was one of the light experts. He used to work for NASA. He worked lighting at the International Space Station. He started a company called BIOS Lighting. And one of the things that they've had to do, like for astronauts and stuff, is how do we adjust the light so that they are getting some cyclical light exposure as well. And one of the things he said in the article is, right now, with how we are living, we're in this constant twilight. We stay inside most of the day under artificial lights. We're not getting that natural light. And then at night, we're not turning the lights down either. We're exposed to all this artificial light in the form of, our ambient light or computers, cell pads, iPhones, etc. So this constant light exposure, twilight light exposure, again, seems to be contributing to this risk of chronic illness. It may also contribute to attention deficit disorders, autism, mental health disorders, and it's exacerbated when we are sleep deprived and sleep disrupted on top of that. So his company is now developing an indoor form of light that will more closely match outdoor light. It's not an excuse to not go outside, but at least it may help, those people who really have to work indoors. Dr. Michael Gorman is another circadian researcher down at UCSD, and his work is also, he's part of one of multiple labs. USD alone has 29 labs now looking at lighting and circadian rhythm research. And one of the things he says is, this downside to living in this 24-hour society that electric light enables us to do. This day-night balance is an aspect of our environment that's been around since life began, and we have really messed with it, especially over the past 50 to 75 years. The microbiome, we're aware now, is also affected by sleep. Poor or inconsistent sleep patterns and jet lag also lead to changes in the microbiome. The microbiome are all of the microorganisms that live inside the GI tract. We also have microorganisms in our eyes and our nasal passages, our ears, our skin. There was a study done when they took fecal material, translation poop. They took poop from people who were jet lagged and put them in the gut of healthy mice, and the mice became obese. When they time restricted eating for those mice, there is an improvement in how they do. And again, there's that social jet lag. So it's not just that you're traveling across the United States or to Europe for jet lag, you're experienced a social jet lag if you are not maintaining similar rhythms on the weekend compared to the week. So what's the best time to sleep? It actually depends on what's called your chronotype. Each of us has an optimal time to sleep. And how do you know what your chronotype is? You have to go camping. You have to be outside and get exposed to bright light in the morning and not have artificial light at night. And you will find your pattern will emerge about when your body and your brain naturally want to go to sleep and when they want to wake up. That's your chronotype. Most of us have no idea what our true chronotype is because we stay up where our brains are stimulated to stay up because of the lack of natural light as well as artificial light exposure. So there was a researcher at the University of Colorado who took a group of people who had chronic insomnia, and he took them camping. And within 2 or 3 days, just about everybody was falling asleep before 10 o'clock. So when patients say to me, you know, I can't sleep, I stay up until 2 or 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and I've always done that, I'm like, well, maybe that may be the habit that you've developed, and we can learn habits and then practice those habits, but they may not be health conducing. There's a company called Ubiome that does microbiome assessment. This is not an endorsement for Ubiome, but very interestingly, they've developed a product called the Explorer Kit, which looks at the content of the bacteria in your gut and whether or not you are fostering the microorganisms that are most conducive to sleep. Because interestingly, the microbiome, our second brain, is actually responsible for producing a lot of our neurotransmitters, including GABA. GABA is one of the transmitters that tells our brains to relax, that it's time to relax and go to sleep. And what they're trying to do now is to offer this testing to people and see, do you have a microbiome pattern that isn't conducive to sleep? And if not, what can you do to help to shift that? This often means that we have to look at what we're eating. Are we eating enough plant food and fiber and fermented foods and those things that really do help to produce a healthy microbiome? So it's the timing of our food and our sleep helps the microbiome, and what we're eating also helps the microbiome. So stay tuned. There's going to be so much more. The research on this is just exploding and fascinating. There's a study that just came out looking at microbiome patterns and depression, being able to predict depression in people. There's another study that came out recently suggesting that if the microbiome is unhealthy, you will be less likely to respond to chemotherapy if you have cancer and you need chemotherapy. I sometimes think perhaps we should be delaying the onset of chemotherapy until we help people to clean up their diet and their circadian rhythm so that they're really ready to respond most effectively to the medications. So bottom line, what can we do? Try to get outside and get bright sunlight exposure in the morning for at least 20 minutes without sunglasses. You want that light to hit the back of your eyes. Try to eat your meals at regular times each day so that your gut knows what to expect. Try to have all of your calories in an 8-hour window if you can. Try to get most of your calories in early in the day. If you're going to eat dinner, it should be the smallest meal of the day. Try not to snack so you're not confusing your gut. Eat plenty of plant food, vegetables, fiber to support your microbiome. Reduce light exposure in the evening if you can, and sleep according to your chronotype. This is a quote from John Muir. When we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. This was one of the most difficult talks I feel like I've tried to put together, because I feel every one of these things is tied to the other. We no longer can say, oh, you're a diabetic because your weight is too high or you're not getting enough exercise. In fact, probably all of these things, our biorhythms, our food, our sleep, in addition to our relationships and our joy and our work, and all of these things affect our well-being, and it in fact is very difficult to tease one or two things out and say that that is the cause of our problem. And it's the good news and the bad news. The good news is sometimes when we just simply try to start to adjust our rhythms to what we were genetically programmed to do, that is enough to get us started. So just to learn more, Dr. Panda wrote a book called The Circadian Code. His app is mycircadianclock.com. Dr. Kshagar is another Ayurvedic physician who wrote a book, Change Your Schedule, Change Your Life, again about circadian rhythm. The government has some information. The New York Times did a great article last summer, and Chris Kresser has some great information on circadian rhythm. And thank you so much.